Hi, this is Brad. I'm going to show you what I think might be one of the better deals and one of the better options for an eSIM card for your phone when you travel. This is the one that I use. It's the one I've used for, I think, at least 15 years. I think so, somewhere in that range. And it's really good. The company's called Keepgo, and I have no affiliation with the company. I don't get a referral fee. I may get a referral, like a data bonus if you buy anything through my link. I got to find the link, but that's not why I'm doing this, just so you know. So I'm doing it to try to help people because I like the product. But yeah, I am going to have some kind of a link that, again, I don't think it gives me money. I think it might add a little data. And I don't think I've ever got any data from that link. So, sometimes people say, oh, he's going to get some data. Oh, that's no good. Who cares? It doesn't cost you any. And if it helps me, why not? But again, that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about Keepgo. So you can see they sell eSIM, SIM cards, Wi-Fi hotspots with prepaid data for Europe and also a lot of the rest of the world. What makes them unique? Well, firstly, I guess the main thing is that the data doesn't expire. Okay, so I used a competitor's eSIM recently, and it expired in 7 days. So 7 days done. Whatever I paid, if I used it, I used it. If I didn't, it's done. I'm going to go off on a tangent for a minute, and then I'm going to come back to this. When you use an eSIM card, and I think most of you know how to install it, it's not hard. If you have questions, I guess you can Google it. I was going to say put it in the comments section, but I really don't want to deal with it. But it's really simple. There's usually a link or like a code, that you follow on your phone, and then it will install it. But when you travel, I recommend that you turn off all your backups typically because those are going to use data in the background. So in other words, like let's say you have a bunch of apps like I do. You don't want to burn all your data, right? You don't want to use all that updating it. If you're going to update it, do it manually later when you're on a Wi-Fi network or something. But don't. One time I burned through like 2 gigs of data, just because I didn't know it was updating these apps that I don't even use really. So turn that off, and maybe the same for your phone's videos and your photos. Like I have Apple, but you could have Android or whatever. They're uploading in the background to iCloud. That can use a lot of data too. So when I'm on a data only SIM card, I turn all of that off, right? And then later, when I'm in a hotel or whatever, I just go with Wi-Fi only, and I upload all that and I back everything up. Another thing you should also be aware of is for an eSIM, this is a data only card, right? So if your regular cellular service, you probably know this, isn't going to work on this. Just things that are driven by data, which is most things. Almost anything you use is going to be data driven. What I do sometimes if I need to make phone calls, I used to use Skype, but they're out of business now, but I'll use Google Voice, or there's a app I use sometimes called Talkatone. Those don't require a cellular phone number, so you're not going to have a cellular phone number. And when I use this, I go into the to the cellular section, and like some phones you can have 8 or more eSIMs, right, in your regular carrier as well. So I'll go to my regular carrier, I'll just flip the switch and turn that one off, and then I'll turn this one on. And you can usually do a custom name. I call it something very creative like Keepgo, but you can call it whatever you want, right? You call it travel or something like that. But just, you may want to turn off your regular. Now, another thing, and I'm going off on another tangent before I get into this, you might say, well, gee, I have Verizon, which I do, by the way. Why not just use my Verizon? I could pay them $10 or whatever it is, sometimes less for a daily travel pass. Sometimes that could work, but the problem you have is that you have a really limited amount of data, and then they throttle you heavily, usually, right? Verizon does. So, they might give you, I'm just pulling this number out, a half a gig, maybe a little more, right? At 5G speeds. But then once you hit that, they throttle you sometimes all the way down to 2G. That's unusable, completely unusable. So, it sounds like a good option. It sounds convenient, but I don't think it's a good option. Unless all you're going to do is like check your email, then that's probably fine. But if if you're traveling and you might want to upload a picture to, social media or something like that, nah, that's not going to be good. So let's look at some of these plans. Let's look at the plan I have and I had. And the one I had was this Iridanus. I don't know how you pronounce that, but and then I switched it to another. Now you can see, and that's the middle one. World SIM expanded coverage in 150 plus countries, right? And 3 gigs. This one's a little more expensive. The one I switched to is the one on the left, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So don't let this scare you off because the pricing really varies. So this one covers a lot, right? This one covers 150 countries. Let's go to countries and networks real quick. Why does it hate me? Sometimes it does that. Countries and networks. Here we go. So, like, just taking the first few, take Argentina. Okay, you see they have 3 networks: Claro, Movistar, and Personal, or probably Personal, or something like that. But so it can use any of these networks you see. Now, you do see some islands in the Caribbean, and the one I switched to doesn't really have much in the Caribbean. See, you got a couple networks in Australia, Austria, Bahamas. You got Barbados, you got Belgium, 3 different networks: Bolivia, British Virgin Islands, Canada, Cayman Islands, China. Let me also say that go by what it said, where it says it'll work. It could be you have a bad signal and you have a problem, but I've also found that every now and then it works somewhere it doesn't say it's going to work. Like when I traveled to China, I don't think at that time the one I was using said Japan, and it did actually work in Japan. Now you can see now, I think this is the same one I was using. It does say Japan, but it didn't used to. So I have found sometimes that it works in places that it doesn't say it's going to work. Latvia, hey, guess what? You got 3 networks. You got Malaysia, you got Martinique, you got Mexico, Morocco, Nepal, Netherlands, New Zealand, even Africa, Norway. You got a lot on this card. Portugal, Puerto Rico, Romania, St. Lucia, a couple networks in Russia, 4 networks in Romania. So I switched my data over to this one on the left, Tucana. All right. If you look at the prices under, like, let's say 5 gigabytes, okay, Tucana is $33. I'm not gonna pronounce it. Iridius, whatever it is, 78. So it's more than twice as expensive. Well, why is that? Usually it's because you have less coverage, but you still have a lot of coverage on this one. Hey, it worked the first time. So you can see like Albania, Algeria, Andorra. I'm going to go to Norway. I'm just going to scroll back. Now you got Costa Rica, but is Norway covered? I think it is. Let's just see. Yeah, it is. I got 2 networks. Okay, and I'm also going to go to Germany soon. Is Germany covered? Yes, it is, I believe. Yeah, 3 networks. What you may or may not notice on this one is, again, it's got a lot of different options, and you can just go to it. I'm going to scroll through it kind of quickly. Estonia, Greece, India, Isle of Man, Laos, Malta, Mexico, New Zealand. It doesn't have as many like Caribbean islands as the other one. So if you're going to go to the Caribbean, you might want to buy an eSIM just for that, or maybe one of the more expensive ones. But it meets my needs usually, but there's a lot. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time on all these, but you can see like Corvus, 30 plus countries, the Antares, 25. Some are a lot more than others. Heck, I can't even pronounce it. I'm not going to pronounce all these. Orion. It's not even showing all of them. Where did it even go? Hang on. Products. See all eSIMs. eSIM data bundle. Yeah, so they have a lot of different products for a lot of different needs. And you just have to kind of click on it to see. I mean, you can look at the pricing, right? If it's one that has a really high price, maybe you don't go with that, Like here's one 50 gigs on the right here, 740. Well, I probably wouldn't use that, right? That one is expensive unless you have some really, specific need, right? And you're probably not going to buy that much data anyway. But some of them are much, much cheaper than that. Like this one, Asia, Saudi, lifetime data, 10 destinations, not that many. Some of the others are 150 or 200. I'd also encourage you to read the review. Now, there are some new plans. Like you see this one at the bottom, whatever it is, Capricornus or whatever. That's a new plan. I don't think that covers a lot. And it's also kind of expensive, I think. So you just have to look at where you're going and what your needs are. Again, I like some of the global plans, like the one I have, is pretty good, the Tucana. But again, if I was going to travel, one thing too that they'll do that's kind of cool is Like, let's say the plan I showed you earlier, can I even find it? The one that was a little more expensive that covered a lot of stuff. Is this it? Yeah, this one on the upper left, the Iridius or whatever. So I had that plan, right? And then I decided to convert it to Tucana because it was less than half the price. Now I got about 95% of the coverage, but there were some things that I didn't get. There were a few countries I didn't get. And so I think that's going to, and by the way, you see here 5 gigs is $78 on this one. So let's say I had 5 gigs, right? I already had it. I'd already bought it. And then I want to go to Tucana. 5 gigs is $33. That's less than half the price. So when they move the data over to your new plan, they're going to give you like twice as much data because you paid more for the other, if that makes sense. So like what I had to do is I'm not going to go into in the upper right, my account settings, but it has like a account for each eSIM that you own, right? So what I would do is buy a new one for, let's say, Tucana. I'd buy, let's say, 100 megabytes. That's $2, big deal. Okay, so now I've got a new plan number or SIM number, well, account number, I guess is what it really is. And then I just email them and I say, hey, I've got, would you please take all my data on account number blah, 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 right? It's kind of a long number, not that long, and move it to my new Tucana plan account, blah, blah, blah. And then they do it and they convert it and then you can move it back. So like, let's say I was going to travel somewhere and I wanted to use this data, but it was something that wasn't covered, stop that. That is one slight negative sometimes is this thing is really a little fussy when you click on it. But countries and networks, yeah. So let's say I'm going to go to, I mentioned the, like Bahamas or something like that, and I'm not covered on this. Okay, if I wanted to, I could say, hey, move it over to something that does cover it, and then I can move it back, and they're not going to give you a hard time for that. So I think that's really about it. They have a lot of plans, a lot of different pricing. You can just kind of go through it. Some of them are very cost effective. Some of them are not as cost effective. But again, the really cool thing is you get a lot of flexibility. You can move from one plan to the other. Just don't do it every day because you'll probably irritate them. And that is something the back office has to do. You can have multiple eSIMs. I think my phone will hold up to 8. With 2 active at any one time. So like I could have the one that I have and then, I could purchase a cheaper one that's just for like the Caribbean or something and just use that when I travel and then turn that off. So advantages of Keepgo, pricing's pretty good. They work in a lot of places usually. Again, you got to read it, but again, looking at the one I have, 102 countries, 230 networks, that's a lot of coverage. And the other one was like 150 countries, a little more expensive, but that's gives you almost anywhere you might want to go, right? And the biggie is the no expiration. I don't know any other card that has that. Maybe there's some, but I'm not familiar with it. So that makes it really cost effective, in my opinion. So I guess I'll wrap this up. I hope you found this useful. Again, this is a company that I've used their products. I've had really good luck. Every now and then I have it where it doesn't work quite like it should. I'm in certain country and maybe I'm not getting quite the coverage I expected, but I would say 9.5 times out of 10, it does what I think it's going to do. And usually the speeds are very good too, but again, just go through the different plans and decide which one is right for you. And again, kind of the cool thing is if your needs change, you can change it. If you bought a plan that you don't love it or you find out later that's not going to cover where you're going, find another plan and buy that 100 megs, buy it $2-3 and then just move it over, have them move it over. You'll just, there's a chat kind of a feature and you just have to reference each plan number and then they'll do that for you. So wrapping it up, it works well and it's cheap and the data lasts forever. What more do you want, right? And it's easy, I think. So if you have questions or comments, leave them in the mark section here on YouTube. I am going to post this referral link that seems to, I don't know, people get weird about referral links. They're like, oh my God, he might get some free data. Well, yeah, why not? For sure. But again, it doesn't cost you anything extra, and I'm not talking about it because I want some extra data. I'm talking about it because I want you to have some good options when you travel, right? So that's it. Comments or questions in the remarks section. Hope you found it useful, and I hope this works well for you. Let me know what you think of it. Bye bye.